Hi, and welcome to Hypothetically Intentional, where we ask the question, what if we set intentions with everything we do? I'm your co-host, Michelle, and today we again have our special guest, Daryl. Welcome, Daryl.
Co-piloting for part 2.
Right, or part 3. We're not sure how many this is going to be. We always have so much to talk about. We alluded to fear in our last episode. Do you want to set an intention around fear too?
I'm afraid to. No.
That's amazing. Nicely played. Well done. Well done.
Go ahead. You do this one.
I think my intention or our intention, or I invite you to set the intention to explore fear and lean in. Yeah. I think over time I've learned that if I just shift my relationship to fear even the tiniest bit and be willing to explore it versus run from it, it has changed absolutely freaking everything in my world. So I don't know, let's just see what happens.
Well, the fear stops so many people from living their potential, and fear manifests itself in a lot of different ways. I'm not only talking about like heights or snakes or whatever. I'm talking about fear of actually living a life or your authentic life. And you spoke about how, you didn't even explore any other colleges because you're just going to stay at the U. A lot of people don't move or do something for that fear and the fear of the unknown. What is sad to me is that life is lived outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And if you're afraid to take that step out, you're afraid to then grow and be. And from my own personal experience, when at the time when I lived in that type of fear, it boiled down to I was not only afraid of the unknown, but I was afraid of who I was going to have to become, because I knew me at that moment. I knew what was expected of me at that moment. And even though my world was trauma-filled and chaotic, I knew that version of me. So to step outside of that and it made me afraid of, well, what is going to be expected of that version of me? So it held me back from living. I've lived a lot of different places, but I've never lived a lot in those places because I was always running from myself without even knowing that's what I was doing. So I was existing because I was okay to move, but I wasn't okay to change. And that fear held me back from actually living a different life or a better life, in my opinion. You said you were okay with, who you were because you didn't even know who you weren't going to be. And I look back at it and go, damn, who could I have been?
Yeah.
I look at it from the other side of that coin.
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting, and I don't want to say a blanket everyone, but it's been my experience with myself and then clients and friends and people I know and work with. We are so comfortable in our discomfort. We are so comfortable in our pain until we're not. And then if we wait until that point, then it's so far gone that it's so painful that there's no other choice than to step into something different, to try something new. But like I was so comfortable being uncomfortable in my own skin. I was so comfortable not taking a lot of risks, because I was afraid. I was so comfortable where I was in so many different places, but I also always felt like something was missing. I always felt, but I was comfortable with that too. I was like, well, that's okay, because at least I know that's known. Even knowing that something is missing is more comfortable for me at that time than me stepping into the possibility of something new, for a million different reasons. And those layers are many. We don't have to go into them on a podcast, but I find it fascinating that like there's a piece of us that will resist any sort of change simply because it's unknown. And then when we do, find the tools and the people that can support us and guide us and move us through that, I find it's such a weird thing because like I had to mourn who I was. I had to mourn everything she didn't do for herself. I had to mourn the fact that I wasn't able to stand up for myself. I had to mourn the fact that I didn't have confidence. I had to mourn the fact that I didn't believe I was lovable. I mean, all those different stories that I was telling myself, like I was sad for her. I was sad for that girl because once I stepped into like, oh no, like I deserve some shit, and I have a lot to offer too. And it doesn't have to be at the expense of myself anymore. Wait, what? What does that look like? Like, and then to not go back to my old self and be guilty and shamey around it, because those were two normal experiences for me, like guilt and shame. I'm great at those things. I used to be, and I still can go there. Andrew called me out on one of the podcasts. There's something that I said, and he's like, when you say that, and as soon as he said it, I was like, oh, that's an old guilt and shame pattern. Damn it. Ah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that a lot of our fear of change is based on what will others think.
Yeah.
Because if you stop giving a crap what others are going to think, and you only care about what do I think about myself, how do I feel about myself, then you're bolder to live more authentically. If you're always shrouded in, then you got to be a chameleon to everybody around you. And, I have a good friend now who is living more authentically than he ever has, but there's still a piece of him that is worried about what his circle is going to say because of his new way of living. So he still hides a little bit of who he truly is. And it's kind of frustrating because you see these bold moves that he's making to live authentically, and then this still veil of, oh, what are they going to think of me if they knew the true me or how I truly felt? It's unauthentic to live in that kind of fear, which does a disservice to ourselves because it makes that pain point. We want to know our purpose and our passion, and we want to be this thing, but then we're afraid, what will others think of it? Well, yeah, it's none of my business what you think of me.
Yeah. Well, and the other piece of that is, so like, if I think about, blanketly who I used to have in my world, so many of them weren't actually for me. They weren't against me, but they certainly weren't for me, and they weren't meant for me either. Right. And it's like, the more now that I'm going to show up as myself. I just had an experience. I'll tell you a story. But if I show up as myself, then if people don't like me, well, that's okay. But then, because otherwise the energy and the effort that it takes for me to show up in their space is exhausting. If I'm not for them, that's okay. They're not for me either then, probably. Right. Or maybe they are, but I just have to accept that I don't work for them. But I was just at a dinner with my dad and some of his friends, and they were asking me a lot of questions about what I do. And I had an aha moment as I was speaking, because I chose to leave out some of my stuff because I knew my audience. It wasn't that I was hiding. It was that I was answering them specific to what they were asking me about, and leaving out the parts that would have made them uncomfortable. Like, I know it wasn't like it, but it was the first, it was the first time where I was in a crowd and somebody asked me what I did, and I didn't get anxiety or nervous about, oh God, I can't tell them that part. Or, oh, it was a mindful choice, which was a very different energy. I was not exhausted. It was a delightful dinner. They learned a lot about how I coach and how I help people. They asked me a lot of questions that I found really interesting. And the fact that I was able to answer them in flow without a whole lot of angst made me realize how much work I've done and how confident and comfortable I am in what I do. It was amazing.
Well, there's a big difference between not evolving because of fear of what they think and not sharing in not making them uncomfortable. There's a difference. You're still being authentically you in who you are. It just wasn't the right place to share. You don't have to word vomit on everybody.
Yeah. And I don't have to share every single thing. It wasn't even what they were asking about. Even though it's a tool I could use, it wasn't a tool that they were asking about. So I chose not to. And it was amazing.
But you still live your life. If you're afraid of what your circle is going to say about you, then it's a transactional friendship.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're having to be part of a cult. If you only follow this rule and do this thing and this thing, then we will accept you. If you step outside of that, you're no longer part of our little group. And people get held back by that fear of being excluded from that group, when in reality, that group wasn't meant for you because you're trying to hide who you were to be a part of that group.
Yeah. And I think, witnessing people as they are is such an interesting thing. And I used to take everything so damn personal. Like everything just like hurt my feet. Like, oh, you just punched me in the feelings again. I got punched in the feelings again. Oh, it was so painful. And now I'm finding, like I had a long conversation with a friend not that long ago. Well, it wasn't that long of a conversation, but I think it was at the retreat actually. And I was just saying, I'm not necessarily a phone person. I don't talk to my boys. I talk to my boys, I don't know, occasionally, like when we do the podcast, but like I didn't text them all the time when they were in college. We didn't have like a monthly or a weekly or a daily check-in. Like they called me when they needed me. They knew I was around, but I wanted them to just be. And there was a chunk of time there where I was like, hey, you're okay with that, right? Like you don't need me. If you need that from me, I can show up in that way, but that's just not really how I tick. And I was saying that same thing. We were having a conversation. I just said, I'm not a person who needs a lot of points of contact, but if you need me, I will drop everything and like we'll go wherever we need to go. But I have friends who need more contact, and we've just sort of agreed to find a happy middle, to find a happy middle where it's like, it doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean you're not on my radar all the time, but like my job is to talk a lot. And so I don't typically, like when I'm done with my day or between appointments, pick up a phone and call somebody, especially when I'm coughing, but that's a whole nother story. Right. But to have that conversation is important, because otherwise these people feel like my mom needed a lot of contact. She was a person who like we texted all the time. We probably didn't talk on the phone as much as she would have preferred, but I'm not that person. And we danced our dance and we found our happy medium, and we both felt loved because we were able to like talk about that. Right. But I mean, my point in all of that is just like how people show up and what they need. Like if you don't communicate it, then how do they know? But there's a difference between that sort of a relationship and the relationship of hiding who you actually are, because either giving them what they need at the expense of yourself, or hiding who you are because you're afraid that they won't accept you if you show them who you really are. Right. And
I think
I just go, ooh, that's scary. That's scary.
But I think a lot of people live their life that way.
Yeah.
And you and I have coached a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's usually an underlying theme. I mean, people all have their different stuff and their own versions of trauma and all the crap that they're trying to overcome. But there's usually an underlying thread that's very similar. What do you think the fear of showing up authentically from the people you've coached stems from?
Yeah, I can even speak of my own personal experience is fear of judgment, fear of not being accepted, which then can trigger neglect, abandonment, right? Or it can be the feeling of being unlovable. I mean, these are all normal things that happen in people's lives. Even, it doesn't have to be like a full-blown intentional abandonment, right? It can be something tragic happened in the family and everybody's attention needed to go somewhere else. And then there you were, not a malicious intentional thing, but still your truth and your reality, and it affected you. And so if you have any of those underlying, or had to fit into a certain box to be accepted, otherwise you were judged, and then people tried to change you, right? Like there's just so many, that's not an uncommon thing in clients, right? Like I grew up in a place where I had to fit in a certain way. If I didn't, this is often where we get our perfectionism and where we get our control needs and like all these kinds of things. So it's like, if you don't trust people to accept you for who you are, and I don't mean trust, this is from past experiences, if you're afraid of getting judged, you're not going to show them all of you. If you know a little, because if you know them deeply, there's probably a little nugget of them that is going to feel uncomfortable with that piece of you. So then you're not going to show it. But like, what if you knew you were surrounded by people who you knew you could trust to love you anyway, right? To love you still, to love you through a tough experience. That's a whole different thing. But like to love you for you. And like Dan and I talk about that. Unconditional love. What does that mean? It means I love every bit of you, even the bits I don't like. Like I don't have to like every bit of you. I don't have to like all of the ways you show up in the world, but you as a whole human, I love that. And I'm not going to try and change the bits of you that I don't like. I'm going to understand that that's important to you and it's an important piece of who you are. Just like there's pieces of me that you don't love, right? But you don't like. You love, but you don't like. And that, like, accepting someone, all the bits, even the pieces, because honestly, most of the time, the stuff that we don't like about other people are things that are uncomfortable for us, things that trigger us in some way, right? Like, it's just so fascinating to me when you start diving into this stuff. It's the things we avoid. It's the things we don't want to look at, or the things we seek out because they're super weird and uncomfortable and not even healthy, but they're comfortable because it's what we knew. And so we get drawn back into that pattern because that's where we started and it feels good, or it feels familiar, maybe not good, but at least familiar, which feels safe, which is not true, but it happens.
Yeah, it's a false sense of security. You were very instrumental in bringing awareness to, I have been a lifelong learner. I love, as some would say, a sage or a seeker, whatever. I love learning. But what you helped me realize is that I, in my life, have used learning as an avoidance to actually doing, which played into my fear of having to show up as that new person. So the dots all connected. I have to gather this certificate and that certificate and this degree and that degree, and I have all these shiny tools. But as long as I keep learning new and better ways, I don't ever have to pick up the tools and use them to build my house.
Yeah.
If I pick them up to build my house, you might see that I suck as an architect. Right?
It's accountability, man. That freaking shit is hard. It's scary because, like, what do you mean I don't get to blame someone else? Why do I have to take accountability for this? Yeah.
But it's interesting that fear shows up even in something as simple as, oh, you're just learning new things. No, I'm avoiding doing other things, which is related to the fear I have of showing up authentically, because who does that person require me to be? And it's not even who you expect me to be. Who do I expect me to be?
Right.
And that's the fear underlying. And I don't feel that enough people peel back their onion deep enough to get to the root. People will weed a garden, and then 2 weeks later, they'll be back out there weeding the garden. Well, if you go out there and dig up the friggin' roots, then you can go a month or two and not have to be in the garden.
Oh, yeah. I'm all about the root causes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think enough people are willing to face the fear of getting to the root. They'd rather just be surface level and, cut off that part of it, which is a shame, because we could show up better for each other as a society and as humans if we just showed up more authentically to who we are.
And I think sometimes we got to just get at that surface layer first and get comfortable there so that we have the capacity and the strength to go to those deeper places. But the complete resistance and avoidance of those deeper places, I mean, that is in and of itself a vicious cycle that will just keep you, I mean, you're still stuck in some sort of swirl. And I think it's the fear of the unknown. I'm pretty open about my story and all the different things that I've uncovered, or, I've been through 2 divorces. And I think sometimes people hear my story and think, oh my God, what if I didn't know? Because there's a piece of my story that I didn't know. What if I have something in my past that I didn't know about? And like, what if I don't want to uncover anything like that? And it's like, hang on, like, that's not what this has to look like. It's not necessarily what it's going to look like. Like, just because I share my story openly doesn't mean that, like, you're going down the same road. Like, we all have our own stories and our own paths. And I really, truly believe, well, and I have a deal with my guides as well, like healthy boundaries with my spirit guides, but like, we're not uncovering anything that it's not time for, that you're not ready for. Like, it happens in a sequence on purpose. That's intentional. That is divinely guided. So you're not going to be taken to a place that you're not meant to go to yet. Like, I really believe that, well, you said it best when I've never thought about it in this way, but when you said it, I 100% resonated. You were talking about like being what words did you use? Oh my God, it's going away. The excavator, like not using dynamite to blow it up, but to just going in and dusting off the parts and like, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've worked with many coaches, and having been a coach myself, I've seen many styles, and I always attribute, there are some who go in with a stick of dynamite and just blow shit up, which makes fragmented more mess. And then there's others like you and me that go in there with a love and care and compassion, and we excavate and uncover, almost like an archaeologist,
That's the
with
word I was
a
looking for.
little brush, to gently
Yeah.
uncover what's beneath the surface, and then what's beneath that, and we do it in a gentle way so that you're not leaving more fragments. You're actually building healthy boundaries to eventually uncover the whole city.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is why we connect so well, right? Because it's like we both have an understanding and appreciation of the care, the compassion, the love, like that has to go into healing, like that safe, sacred space, that container, and having various levels and layers of support when we're doing this work, because fear is going to happen. Fear is going to come up in so often in this journey. And if fear gets out of control, that takes you down a whole nother rabbit hole that does not lead to good places. And I'm not saying it's like devastating or anything. I'm just saying it doesn't necessarily get you uncovered. It
Yeah,
brings up old things. And so the fact that you honor and appreciate the, like, what's required.
so since we all experience some level of fear on whatever it is we're afraid of, and usually it's about our own authenticity, what would you say would be a universal step that a person could take to start to overcome that so they can live that more authentic life?
That's such a good question. So that answer for me has evolved over time. In the now, how it's feeling with myself and my clients and friends, it comes down to self-trust. Because if you trust yourself, that no matter what comes your way, you'll find a way, you'll figure it out. Like, I'm here, I'm 53 years old and I'm still here. Somehow I've figured it out. Not by myself. I've had great people in my life and in my world to support. Key is I've had to be willing to ask. I've had to be willing to trust myself to ask for the support from, quote unquote, the right people. Right. So I think if you just show up for yourself every single day when you're not in crisis, right? Make a vow to yourself, like whether it's a 40-day habit or whether it's it's starting and ending your day the same way. But that consistency, it sounds like such a simple little thing, but that's that consistency of starting and ending your day with intention. I'm just going to say it that way, whatever that looks like for you, whatever thing you're working on that you want to manifest or give to yourself or honor within you. Every single day, you learn that you will show up for yourself. Come hell or high water, you will show up for yourself, and you build that self-trust muscle, which leads to self-love and self-confidence and self-worth. And so I never had used the word self-trust before, and I don't even remember when it came in. I'm sure it was a download, and I was just like, that might be the ticket. But how do you build self-trust? How do you build trust in another person? Dan always says, it was from I can't remember, it was a podcast or something that he listened to, but like, trust is built in droplets, but it's spent in buckets. So like, building those droplets, putting them into your bucket for yourself so that when something big happens and you got to spend a bunch of it, you still have reserves.
I think another component to doing that effectively, the intention, I think it's like a tripod. If you're sitting on a three-legged stool and you knock one leg off, you're gonna still topple or at least wobble to try to keep it balanced. So I think all three have to be there. I think the intentionality has to be there. I think your clarity of what you want has to be there, because too many people focus on what they don't want instead of what they do want, and they look at it in the wrong. So the intentionality, the clarity, and then the gratitude with action. Because whatever life you're living, there is some part of it, no matter how crappy it may be, that you can still be grateful for. And when the universe decides that you can be grateful with little, it will give you much.
Yeah.
If you can't be grateful for little, it's not going to give you more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think all three of those need to play their part. But often we just focus on one, and we don't actually get to, doing all three. But I think if a person actually just takes time, and it doesn't take hours, just take 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, whatever, wake up and set your intention. This is going into your your podcast. Set your intention for the day.
Yeah.
Set your gratitude for having that day to give, and then be clear on what it is you want to do with it.
Yeah. And I love what you said about it being simple, because this is going to sound really silly, but I really truly believe that one of the biggest things I did for myself that moved more than I could have ever imagined it ever would have is when I was in my yoga teacher training. I realized that I put a lot of tension in my body with my emotions, and with my emotions come breath holding. I was a breath holder. I hold my breath when I get frustrated. I hold my breath. I held my breath as a baby. Like I'm a breath holder. And I realized that I needed to set the intention that I would take mindful breaths, that I needed to set the intention that I would catch myself when I tensed up and held my breath. And every time I did that, my intention was that I would soften my muscles. I would take an inhale and an exhale just a couple times. And even just doing that was like making me realize I didn't have to live in fight or flight all the freaking time. I can get into my parasympathetic nervous system and calm the heck down and just freaking breathe. It's such a simple thing, but like that was profound for me, because it got rid of I had a hip thing that was happening, and it was all because I put tension on the right side of my body it's like, oh my gosh, Michelle, but I didn't even know what was happening. And then once I did, it was like, just take a breath. Like just soften, take a breath with intention to soften, and be grateful that you know how to do that. Be grateful that you can. Be grateful that that breath is such a powerful tool. And that's it. That's all you need. I don't need to spend money to do that. I don't need, I did spend a lot of money. I'm like you, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a seeker. I love to learn. I love to learn and, dive into all those things. And that's great when I'm doing it to dive in and do the work. But when I'm doing it to dive in and avoid any accountability or any sort of like actual healing, that's a whole different thing. And I catch myself in it. Ooh, what's the next thing I'm going to learn? Wait, hang on. Why do I want to learn something so bad right now? I need to know that answer before I dive into whatever I'm doing next. Because I do like to learn. It's part of my being. It's my soul. But why?
You're right. But why? Yeah. There's, full circle there, but why?
Yeah.
And that's being awareness, and that's not being afraid of being authentic, because it's part of who you are, not what you're running from. And that's knowing yourself and being clear about it. So
yeah, be willing to ask yourself your why. Why are you doing this particular thing? Are you stuck in an old pattern, or are you showing up like for yourself right now? Because stuck in an old pattern is showing up comfortably right now. Uncomfortably comfortable, but comfortable, right? And showing up for yourself, knowing your why, like that it's for yourself, probably a little harder, but makes life easier in the long run. Probably a little more challenging, probably brings up a little bit of that fear feeling, right? Where you get that ooh, I feel a little bit of anxiety coming on here. What's happening? That's when I get excited, because I know something good is going to happen and something big is in the progress, and I'm willing to lean into it. And I get proud about that. I'm proud of myself for not running from it anymore. I'm proud of myself that I trust myself to navigate it, and that I have amazing people in my world, like you, who I know can hold space.
Well, the misnomer is that there should be no fear, which is BS, because there wouldn't be courage if you didn't have fear, because you wouldn't have nothing to be courageous about.
Right.
But the allowing it to stop you from living your life is the part that you have to be the most courageous about. And one of my favorite lines comes from We Bought a Zoo with Matt Damon. When he told his little girl, if you just take 20 minutes of courageous action, I promise you something good will happen. Or he said 20 seconds, not 20 minutes. But 20 seconds of courageous action, something good will happen. And it's like, that's all. You just got to push past whatever that fear is, whatever's holding you back. Just 20 seconds of courage to push past it.
It's like, take a pause, use your discernment, know that it's a good yes, but say yes when you would have said no, and see what happens. It will change your freaking life.
Which is why you and I both have our podcast, and why we're both here helping impact the world. So.
Exactly. And that feels like a wrap. That feels like where the woo meets the world, and where the logic meets magic, and yay. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I very much appreciate it. Is there anything else? We have one last little nugget that you want to share?
No, I think we've shared a lot.
I think we've shared.
Let them chew on that for a while.
Yeah. Let them chew on it. I love it. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us. You can follow me on jidwellness.com. Social media would be Facebook is JD Wellness, Instagram is JD Studio. Michelle Albers with 2 A's, Aalbers is good. Daryl, where can they find you?
They can find me at Praxis 33 on Facebook or a Warrior Spirit on YouTube.
Beautiful. I have a YouTube channel too, but I never talk about it. I don't know why. Someday I'll dive into that one more.
That's where I host all my interviews. So I got to talk about that one.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a good one. I do follow your YouTube. It's great.
Thank
all
you.
right, everybody. Thanks for joining us again for another week of Hypothetically Intentional. We'll catch you next time. Bye. Be you every day.
Bye.